Welcome home. We're home. Officially call to order the, is this close enough? Yeah. The call to order the regular meeting of Coachella Valley Water District Board of Directors, March 22, 22. And we have comments that I want to do to just open the meeting. I'd like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted as permitted under AB 361 and Board Resolution 2021-43. Today's meeting is presented in a hybrid format, in person at CVWD's Coachella office and via Zoom. AB 361 suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act, allowing district board members to participate in person or by video conference. The public may view the board meeting online or participate in person. The meeting is streamed on the district's website and YouTube channel. Members of the public may also join the meeting via Zoom. Zoom details are listed on the meeting agenda. Members of the public who wish to comment on any item on the agenda or within the jurisdiction of the district will have 3 minutes. Public comment may be provided in person, via Zoom, or by emailing the clerk of the board. Such comments will become part of the board meeting record, and if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature to get our attention, get Secretary or Clerk Bermuda's attention. Let's see, so we're going to be all present, looks like, here. So I don't think we need to worry about the rest of this. And with that, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, much better sounding here already.
Yeah, it's like an
Because we're
echo.
so close.
No, you're fine. I can see right around you. You're so skinny.
It's all good. Good. So roll call, please.
Good morning, President Powell,
Morning. Here.
Vice President Estrada,
Here.
Director Bianco,
Here.
Director Aguilar,
Here.
and Director Nelson.
Here.
Thank you.
We're all here. Do we have any additions, deletions, or adjustments to today's agenda? Not hearing any. We're going to move on. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on any items at this time?
Mr. President, I do not show anybody online at this time.
Okay. Let's see now. Consent calendar, we have, I'm not even going to take a chance this time. Items 5A through I.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I did want to pull G.
Okay.
Item G.
Okay, so the motion would be to approve the balance of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passed. And so 5G is the funding with the DWR.
Yeah, and just to clarify my question, I guess I wanted to get a sense of next steps. So it looks like there's a draft agreement in front of us, resolution, and then I would just wanted to hear about what happens once. Are we supposed to review the draft agreement and agree to it, and then sign it and send it back to the state, and then they sign it, and then where does that put us?
Yes, so the board action items to actually authorize to authorize the general manager to execute the documents. So there is a draft version right now. There is a final that's they're currently working on. As soon as we approve this resolution, they're going to go through and send us the final version for signature. So we're hoping that as soon as it gets approved at this meeting, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should be able to finalize all the executive documents.
So the state's going to send you a final.
Send us a final
and
version.
then you'll sign that,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll be closer to. And then I didn't get to go through the whole document, but there's a portion in there for payment method.
Yes.
Is the idea that we would send them a one-time invoice at the end of the project, and then they would reimburse us the $7 million, or?
So that is the one that that's kind of pending right now. So currently, we proceeded to go ahead and sign up for the reimbursement method, which is how the other grants are being processed. Now, back last March 11th, the Senate did propose to do a lump sum payment, which we get the funds ahead of time, but the governor has to sign that bill. Senate bill. So as soon as that's signed, we can go back and have the agreement to be amended to change from reimbursement to a lump sum payment. But to prevent delays, we went ahead and just said, go ahead and let's process the current agreement via a reimbursement, because we wanted to make sure that
Okay.
the funding is available.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Do you move approval?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Great, thanks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed 5-0. Good, good, good. Thank you, Carrie. Such good answers. All right. We are at presentations and recognitions, so looks like we are joined today. You ready with your speech? Just wondering. Connie Carrillo, retiring with 14 years. Customer Service Representative 2, Connie Carrillo, is retiring from CVWD after 14 years of service. Connie's love for customer service is evident in every interaction she has with customers and colleagues. She's a quick learner, takes on a great deal of work, eagerly shares her knowledge with others, and has a great sense of humor. Connie has lived in the Coachella Valley most of her life, but is moving to Indiana with her family. Husband Carlos, daughter Lorena and son-in-law Aaron, daughter Rebecca and son-in-law Alex, son Anthony, and their dog Sugar. Connie's looking forward to buying a bike and exploring Plainfield, her new little town. She wants to start crocheting again and decorate her new ranch-style home. She also plans to spend a lot of time outdoors and sightseeing in neighboring states. Connie says, CVW has been good to me. I will definitely miss my CVW family, and I'm thankful for the opportunity of working here. So congratulations, and come on up. We have something for you.
I'll be on the other side of you, Tom. On your left. And we have a new microphone here because apparently there were complaints that when the employees spoke, nobody could hear them. So, yeah, just lean in. This is for you.
Three, nice smiles. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
All right, over to you, Connie. Over to you, Connie.
Well,
You want me to hold something while you're?
thank you.
All right, you hold this.
I just want to thank the opportunity given to me today by the board and to say a few words on my retirement. I've been very grateful to work here at the Coachella Valley Water District. I enjoyed it very much. I'm blessed to work with an awesome department that's like family to me. Learned a lot while I was here, how water is distributed. Working in the customer service department, we went through a lot of changes, software and protocols, and it challenged me, and I really loved the challenge. I'll miss providing that service to our customers here at the desert. It's surreal to me to stand here in the Forbes Auditorium because it's completing my chapter, and I would have never thought that I'd be standing here where I was in this photo back in 1984, where I ran for Miss Coachella. I never realized that it was here, and it was one of my kids that found this picture, and they said, "Why don't you take this picture in front of the Coachella Valley Water District?" And I forgot that this is where it was. So it's kind of awesome to be part of this family, part of this district, and I would have never thought standing here that it would be where I would be getting my retirement from.
Very, very nice. You ought to take another one today.
I think I will. And I'll have a
Before and
trophy.
after.
So thank you for this opportunity, and also I'm going to leave behind my voice. I was not sure if anybody knows, but I was given the honor to be chosen as the voice of the district. I know it's changed, but still, when you call that one number, we have to dial the extension. It's me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So you have one of the toughest jobs here. I could never do the customer service. Right?
No, it's.
I don't have the patience and temperament, and I've told you guys many times, I very much appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
I know, my little bit.
Thank you,
very
thank you.
much.
My pleasure. See you again. And this is my daughter Lorena and her husband Aaron. So I'll be taking them with me.
I don't see any written communications. So we do have a informational item, item 8B, Scott is going to talk to us a little bit about implementing our water shortage contingency plan. Hi, Scott. Good morning.
Good morning. I thought you were on the way out there. I was curious. Is your mic on? Go over the mic.
Okay, there we go. Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Scott Burrett, Director of Service and Communication, talking about how we will implement the water shortage contingency plan. As you know, the board adopted the plan in June 2021, and since then we've had a voluntary reduction of 15% that was from the governor's office. You know, in the water shortage contingency plan, there are a number of scenarios that would trigger the board to take action, and the most likely would be that the voluntary reduction would become mandatory. And so the water shortage contingency plan envisions a number of steps that the board could take to implement the water shortage contingency plan. Various shortage levels. So right now we're in shortage level number 1, and that is operating at regular, operating as we do now, where we have supplies of 0 to 10%, reduction. And so we're currently complying with all the requirements or all the options under shortage level 1. And if the governor were to impose a 15% mandatory reduction, or a certain percentage, then we would come back to the board of directors and seek your approval to move to the next level, or to determine which options in the next level you'd want to take. Among those options at level 2 would be reducing the outdoor water budget by 10%. Now, that would be up to the board to decide if you wanted to do that, but we do have some other options that we could pursue, and that we are actually pursuing now. Level 2 also envisions imposing fines, but we're already doing that. So we've been doing that since the last drought. We could also, one of the things Adam McWay is going to be presenting, the domestic water regulations. And some of the changes we've made in there are actually designed to discourage overseeding, and that's part of shortage level 2. And we've expanded the public outreach campaign. We've changed our messaging and paid advertising to call on customers to conserve water. One of the proposals we'll be bringing back, based on kind of a little feedback maybe I'll get from the board today, is whether we should expand our rebate programs by increasing the turf rebate from $2 per square foot to $3. And one of the things we found is that since the pandemic, we've been a little bit challenged in meeting some of our conservation numbers, and really for 2 reasons. One is that during 2020, the comparison year that we have to reduce from, we had a lot fewer people in the Coachella Valley. Hotels were shut down, restaurants were closed, airlines weren't functioning or operating at full capacity. And so, it's not a good base year to compare us to. you know, when we're looking at trying to reduce 15% compared to 2020. But the other thing is that some of the landscape decisions at HOAs really take a long time. You know, it's not a homeowner, an individual homeowner can decide pretty quickly to change out turf and go to desert landscaping. But for HOAs, they really have a long decision-making process. There's landscape committees that weren't meeting in 2020, and there's one that I've worked with that they just haven't been able to, you know, get the meetings scheduled and make this a priority, and to get it in their own HOA budget. So we've really been kind of hampered, and we have some money that will probably be unspent on turf rebates for this year. For last year, we spent like half of what was available to us just because we couldn't get the money, we couldn't get people to make decisions. So, you know, we would like to bring that back to the board, and that you know, increasing and expanding the conservation efforts is part of, you know, level 2. So we would like to bring that back to the board if I get any indication that you'd be interested in pursuing the increased rebates to $3. And really, that's my presentation. I'm available to answer questions.
You know, I'm in favor of that. I've been talking to you for quite some years about, you know, being less restrictive on trying to figure out ways. I mean, that is the biggest complaint about all the red tape and the restrictions on doing that, and that the bang is not worth, you know, the buck on this. So, you know, I'm in favor of increasing it even more, even to $4.
Okay.
And trying to figure out a way to making it less restrictive for people. I mean, I understand we want to make sure that we protect the public's funds, but this happens every year. I mean, there's a reason why we don't use all of that money every year. I mean, there's a reason, and the reason is because it's not worth it, you know, and it's a lot of work, and you're not getting a lot of money back. So, and I'm sure turf has gone up, you know, or everything's gone up.
Everything's gone
Everything's
up.
gone up.
And I do appreciate that comment. One of I mentioned it at one of the prior board meetings is that I'm planning on having an internal control audit done in water management. And part of that is looking at the turf rebate, actually all the rebate programs, and seeing what we could do to streamline the process. So I do appreciate that comment, and it's something we can look at and see how we're going to make it easier for customers to get through that process.
I mean, maybe a different approach is to see, you know, if we make it easier and we raise the amount up and it runs out in 6 months, then maybe we need to back off. I mean, maybe that's a different, you know.
Or we can come back to board for more money.
Yeah, that's correct.
You know, I know we've done some outreach to landscapers, but, you know, if we could make it a little bit more like a landscaper facing materials, like almost like a voucher. It might not be a voucher, but something like says, this is, you know, a program that you guys can take advantage of, right? So that
They market it.
they can market it because it's their business that, you know, we're subsidizing essentially. We're basically saying, you guys do this work and we're going to pay back your customer $3 a square foot or whatever it is. I mean, that's a pretty good incentive that they should be pushing, I think. And I don't think they have that much interest in it right now, and they should.
A few years ago, I was involved. This was probably over 10 years ago, but Metropolitan Water District had a bunch of conservation money as well that they wanted to put out to the public. And the way they handled it, they actually had contracts, I think, with landscapers, and anybody who wanted to convert their turf to desert or more friendly landscape would basically have that contractor do it. And as you mentioned, John, the payment was to the landscape contractor. I think it was. It kind of cut out the customer. And the whole work was being done by the contractor, and they had a set of, you know, the plants that they were using. I mean, they basically went in there, they made an appointment and kind of ripped everything out, put in what the landscaper put in, and it kind of cut the customer from having to do all that.
Right, right.
And so I think that's a good idea, and I'd also be
Okay.
in support of an increase. I think that you know, we're generating this money for, you know, to put it out there. I think that was our whole basis of, you know, some of the tiers. So
Right.
I'm in favor of using it. I mean, we have to use it. So
Can the landscapers fill out the paperwork for the homeowner?
I think it's something we can look at. I mean, and I'm probably consulting with Jeff on how we can design that, but we could certainly look at a new model to get the money out there
I mean,
more
it's
quickly.
sort-
I think it's a great idea.
I mean, sort of like the solar does the same sort of thing. I mean, they basically come in and say, you know, we're gonna take care of, you know, they fill out all the paperwork and
Yeah.
do all the work, and you just sign, and they actually get the rebate. So you can ask for that option.
Right.
Maybe that's the same.
It's a model I'm really interested in looking at. So
Yeah, it was,
That's-
so with that model, there's, you know, I think you'd probably move more people to conservation of that. I think it's a good idea. I think one of the negative consequences of that is you get contractors who are just doing a real postage stamp kind of landscaping and trying to turn that into a profit center. And I've seen a lot of those metropolitan, you know, turnarounds on that. And, you know, it's gravel with one cactus.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're getting, you know, $3 or whatever it is a square foot. And it's like, you know, I don't know if that's the type of community that I want, right?
Yeah.
Or that we want to encourage. And so I think we need to, you know, it's a good idea, I think, and we need to get these contractors to market the program. But I think there's some worries about that as well.
I think I saw a different city, but I agree with you. It could be where they're, you know, trying to turn it into a profit by giving you one plant. You know?
Yeah.
But I've
And in 6 months,
Yeah.
the plastic sticking
Yeah.
out of the
no, but
the gravel.
I think I've also seen a different water district or city where they actually came up with like different templates,
Mhm.
and it was like here's you know, 4 different templates,
Mhm.
and that's what you get, and those templates were put together by the district,
Mhm.
and,
Which that
you know,
works, right?
And
Yeah,
so
that works,
so
yeah.
you have some control as to what actually gets installed
Yeah.
and what you're paying for that.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a better way to do it, is come up with the templates and say, pick A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
And that's how much we're gonna pay you for A, B, C, or D.
There you go.
And so,
It has to be profitable though for the landscaper, or you won't get anything done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Yeah, no, that's.
No, it's really a subsidy, so the market is what the market is, and then this helps pay part of that, so it should at least help them sell their product.
I bought a new air conditioner over the weekend, and I received a $3,500 rebate that I didn't even know was on the table, and so I improved the efficiency of my air conditioner
that's a-
because I could.
That's a big
It was
rebate.
more affordable.
Did you have to apply for that?
No, it went
with-
through the
with
contract.
local
It went
power
through.
company?
No, it went through the contractor.
After the
So I mean, that's exactly what I went through.
But
I
it
mean,
was-
I-
and it was easy.
So the
though.
contractor told you about the rebate?
Yeah,
Yeah, see, that's.
and I bought a more expensive air conditioner as a
But-
result of it.
Well, you.
I got 2 of them.
It worked.
Well, you got a higher seer, yeah, which is even better.
Probably isn't even really a rebate.
No, but I think we should pay the money to the customer, not the landscaper. You know, on the other big one on here is the water budget. In my view, I think tier 3 is well constructed. We reduced it a little last time we changed the rate, you know. I think tier 3 is a good tier. There's not a lot of wiggle room in there in my view for outdoor irrigation. And I just don't know that, we'd have to have a really good reason to go drop it another 10% in my view.
And what I would say about the water budget-based tiered rates is that that's really the number one factor that drives conservation. So, you know, we have to make sure the meters are accurate, and I know operations has their proactive meter replacement program, which has been very effective. And in the service department, we've had an effort to identify failed meters and failing meters, and that has a big impact. Also in water management, we're looking at landscaped area, because landscaped area is a factor in.
Tier 2 is the first layer of the.
Yeah.
That's what I meant tier 2, not tier 3.
Oh, okay.
And all the ones above it, but the first level of the outdoor. I apologize.
So water management's looking at making sure the water budgets are accurate by reviewing the landscaped area on properties, and we've reduced landscaped area on the accounts we've looked at, I believe, over 3 million square feet. So that has an impact on making bills more accurate so that people are within their water budgets and a little bit more conservation oriented to keep their bills down.
Right.
Scott, I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Is this thing on?
Yep.
So, you know, I'm in favor of increasing the rebate as well, but I'm not sure that that's going to be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if, I mean, we all saw the article about the 19% increase in usage, the report that was issued by the state for the Coachella Valley. I'm not sure how our numbers directly relate to that, but it's clear that usage is up all over. Why would we not move forward and implement these shortage level 2 recommendations sooner rather than waiting for a mandatory action by the governor?
Well, on shortage level 2, there's actually, so we're, in some respects, we're already doing things in level 2. For example, restaurants only serving water upon request. We're going to be presenting today an approach we have for reducing overseeding. So we could do that. We've improved or increased our public outreach campaign and public information campaign to focus on conservation. So in many respects, we have done some of those things. We could increase the water waste patrols, but I would really like to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the water waste patrols, because somebody going out in the middle of the day when, may not be the biggest bang for our buck if we're trying to drive conservation. Maybe it's looking at Tier 5 reports and kind of reducing customers at the higher end. So rather than moving into stage 2, you certainly could give me that direction, and we could come back and do request the board take some actions in level 2. But
well, I just think, maybe we need to do that, but I know this is just informational today.
Yeah.
But it's pretty clear, just based on the hydrology reports, and, everybody knows this, it's not, brain surgery, but
yeah,
it's not going to get any better, and waiting to implement these additional actions, to me, just seems to prolong the problem that we're going to have inevitably. So I would be in support of hearing any recommendations that would come back to the board that we could implement, because I think if we wait, it's only going to work against us. So I would just leave you with that and suggest that, staff look at that.
And I think the big thing, probably what would have the biggest impact at level 2 would be reducing the outdoor water budgets by 10%. And we could certainly bring that back as a consideration. When we bring maybe the
I'd rather go more with the incentives. The carrot and the stick.
Right.
Go with the
And I
carrot.
guess that's our approach right now. I mean, that's I would rather go with the carrot as well.
So the incentives are not on this, are not on our level 2, right? The turf rebate, the amount of the turf rebate is not part of level 2?
No, but expanding rebates.
Can you bring that back I mean, I'd like to see that one come back real soon. You know, why not? Why don't we?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should get the rebates.
Okay.
You know, which you don't have to declare a shortage to do that.
No.
No,
That's part of
no.
our ongoing program.
Right. Well, and we could bring this back and have a discussion. If you want to have a discussion about the 10%, we could include that. We could include all the items on level
Right.
2. And
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
it's up. Have the board have that discussion at that point on what
Once-
options do you want to exercise.
Once we go with the 10%, would that come with penalties if you don't meet the 10%? Is that the?
Well, you would be placed in the higher tiers more quickly.
Okay.
We just do it in the back room to the algorithm.
Right. And we could implement that pretty easily. And we're not talking about, higher penalties like last time we had
It's
the
not
drought
penalties, but
penalties.
you're paying.
You're
still-
paying.
Yeah, so
I mean,
what you're really doing is you're
You're
using
reducing-
the stick, and then you're saying, I'm gonna use the benefits of the stick to fund the carrot. Right.
It would definitely increase revenue. It would also probably, for people that have worked hard to get to efficient.
Yeah,
And now we're gonna tell them they're not efficient.
yeah, that's,
I'm not sure I like that.
We could bring all of level 2 back to the board for discussion, if that's the direction.
And we have money we haven't spent, so.
Let's work on I think we should just work on
On-
the rebates.
Yeah.
Look at $3, look at $4, look at trying to make it less restrictive. Let's see what we can do to use up all those funds.
Okay.
It's a good thing when we're using all the funds. That means people are switching, taking their grass out. So,
Absolutely.
Director Bianco, your mic, please.
I don't know where we are now, but the last time, I think I heard, where we were with our water budgets was like about 80% of our residential customers were within their tier 2 budget. So it's only 20% of those residential customers that are paying in the higher tiers. And we had a couple hundred folks that were habitually in tier 5. And we directly reached out to try and get them to conserve, or at least cut back. And our success, people just weren't interested in doing it because the water was so cheap, and they wanted a lush landscape. And I think it was very frustrating for staff.
If we're gonna do that, if we're gonna look at that, maybe we protect tier 2, so that when we tell somebody they're efficient, we'll keep telling them that. Because they might be close to I know I look at it and I make sure I'm within it, and sometimes I'm close, but I'm still in tier 2. And if you change the goal, where the goal line is, now all of a sudden I'm in tier 3. It's like, wait a minute. But maybe we shrink down 3 and 4.
3, 4, and,
3, 4, and
well, I
5.
guess 5 you don't shrink,
Five's
because it's
unlimited.
unlimited. Yeah, but 3
Shrink
and
down
4.
3 and 4. I don't know.
I think we get into difficulty with the tiered in the Prop 218 when we start
Cost of service time.
changing things, not uniform.
Well, can we check on that? And maybe we can do that if we have a governor's mandate
Yeah,
where we can't do it today.
We did, so we had drought pricing before, which does not come under the 218, but it was basically applied to all the tiers, 2 through 5. If we start going to only tiers 3, 4, and 5, it gets into how those tiers were formed, and then the impact out to differential impact to customers is potentially.
but I
a
agree,
violation.
let's have our legal team relook at that and
Right. So that's the reason that you adopted this plan last June, is it sets up a uniform process by which you move from one to the other and what the reduction in the budgets would be and when you do so. But we can certainly revisit the options for when you would want to maybe go into what you did last time in terms of reducing the budgets, and that's a penalty, as Director Nelson mentioned, and not a 218 event. But we'll go through that with
Yes,
Scott
But,
and staff.
and so also, sorry.
See legally what it would take, if we could protect our efficient, we've been telling our customers they're efficient, and then we tell them they're inefficient and wasteful and excessive. And if you're efficient, it just seems like,
Yeah, unfortunately, this gets into a known conflict between what is required under one California constitutional amendment and another one.
Right.
So this is the Prop 218, where we can only charge
No, I
when
get it,
process to serve.
but the question is, for the legal people, is does a governor's mandate allow us to do something
Under conservation, which is a
that's
different.
different than what we can do under 218?
Last time, as I recall, we did have penalties.
We did
Yeah,
have
it is.
penalties.
So, yes, we can set up that structure, but
So
we
c-
can revisit that whether or
but-
not it's.
So the penalty would apply to the people that are inefficient, excessive, and
Correct.
wasteful, but it wouldn't apply to people who are efficient. It's logical to me.
It's very logical, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's, I mean,
Well,
from
that's
your
why you have this
experience,
plan.
my experience,
Okay,
same thing.
absolutely. So we will check on that and revisit that based on whether it's stronger or weaker, depending on whether the governor has made a proclamation.
So the proposal is don't apply the penalty to people that are efficient,
Correct.
or whatever the first one is. I've never gotten that one.
Okay. So, but for Scott,
Excellent.
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 but
I
for
never
Scott
got
to
there.
come back at the next meeting, is it to give you options on the rebate program and or a draft of a resolution that would move you to another stage, I think. Right, Scott?
Well, I think we wouldn't necessarily move to another stage. We would just adopt some of the higher stages without actually declaring a shortage and moving to,
Okay, so maybe.
Another
So
stage
the idea
would-
is that we would have a drought penalty that would be applied to tiers 3, 4, and 5.
as opposed to
If-
changing the water budget, as opposed to changing.
changing the budget. And the question is that legal? And it may not be legal today, but it might be legal once the governor
Right.
declares a shortage.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that if we come back with options at the next meeting, there are probably options to get more input. If you wanted us to come up with a plan as to implementing it at the next meeting, that might require some prior noticing to the public that we're gonna potentially adopt
Right.
something
Two
like that.
options. It's just two options.
Well,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
and we didn't necessarily, I mean, I know you want this to come back quickly. You didn't necessarily need, did you want it to come back to the next meeting, or do you want it to come back to, can we bring
Well,
it back in a month?
You know,
and-
I would come back pretty quickly with
Okay.
everything because, this governor's mandate could happen,
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay.
We don't know when it's gonna happen.
Okay.
But we'll come back
And
with
then
the,
we'll figure out the noticing requirements, if there are any
after that. We
noticing
just don't wanna
requirements.
alarm the board and or the public that the next meeting you're gonna go into
No,
another stage.
no.
Okay.
Scott, just one last comment. When
Yes.
you bring the rebate item back to us, I'd like to see more specific aggressive marketing suggestions, because
Okay.
I'm hearing all kinds of conflicting feedback from the public about
So am
the
I.
program.
Okay.
And so I think, Victoria, wherever she is, but maybe working with, information and marketing and all of that on a
Sure.
program that's more
Sure.
targeted.
Okay,
Yeah, yes, good.
Got it.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Mr. President, before we move on, I am informed that we need to add an emergency closed session item, anticipated litigation. I got it. I was looking at the prior draft. Okay, good. Never mind. Belay my last.
While we're on the topic of agenda possible changes, Jeff,
Yes.
10A, I know we're moving into 9 now, but 10A, adopt an ordinance. There's a public hearing attached to that. I don't see anything about a public hearing in the agenda, and I'm wondering if this has been properly agendized.
It's not a public hearing that had to be noticed as such. It was when you adopt an ordinance to change the regulations that would go through the hearing script. But it's not changing any rates, so it's not something that had to be
So
published
how
in
do,
advance.
so how do we have a public hearing if we haven't told the public that
It
there's a
was
hearing?
Mr. President, it was noticed in the Desert Sun and I believe the Ivy Press as well, that the board would be considering adoption of the hearing. It's a process, so as Jeff mentioned, we don't technically have to notice it as a public hearing on the agenda, because it's not including any rate changes.
So-
The staff process has been that we do a script for the hearing, but in fact, we don't have rates, so we could have titled it public hearing.
I know, I just, okay. I mean, I think in the future, if we're gonna have a public hearing, which it looks like we will be, it should say that on the agenda, in my view, so that people who are thinking that they might show up for a public hearing would know that there actually is one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was published as such in the paper, but to the board clerk's point, this is just a process that we use here to have a script in order to go through the process. But we will make that clear.
All right, just assure us we're doing it right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, just say public hearing on the agenda, it's easy.
You got it.
Okay. 2 words. Thanks. 9A, action items. Got William Patterson to tell us about the CEQA Addendum 1. How come you have such exciting work? CEQA.
Your favorite.
It's the most boring.
Good morning. It's good to see you all here, Coachella. Today, we're asking the Board of the Directors to certify Addendum Number 1 to the North Indio Flood Control Project Mitigated Negative Declaration and authorize staff to file a notice of determination with Riverside County Clerk and State Clearinghouse. As you know, North Indio Flood Control Project Phase 2 is currently under construction, and it requires an addendum to the previously approved MND to more accurately describe the protections for cultural resources occurring on the project. The previous mitigation measures outlined in the MND were not feasible, and the revisions are required to allow the construction of the project as planned. The addendum has been developed in compliance with CEQA and Section 15164 for addendums. Essentially what has taken place is the MND that was in 2016 did not carry over the original intent of the Cultural Resources Appendix word for word in the MND, which is actually the document that is followed to the T as far as implementing the mitigation measures for the project. So in the end of the addendum that was attached to this presentation, you can see the old mitigation measures versus the new mitigation measures. And basically, what those are doing is clarifying the intent, the original intent of the Cultural Resources Report. And there's 3 mitigations in there for cultural resources. Number 1, will clarify language to allow the implementation of an archaeological treatment plan and data recovery for those cultural resources in sensitive areas that cannot be avoided due to their location in the project alignment. And so essentially there were some sensitive areas out here that were known at the time. Just the correct language that was in the Cultural Resources Appendix regarding those sensitive areas was not carried over accurately into the CEQA document. Also, there's 2 other mitigation measures, CR2 and CR3 in the MND that will be clarified to better characterize the types of monitoring and reference to the archaeological treatment plan for specific areas of the project and how they are to be monitored. So with that, I trust you've been able to kind of read the attachments to see what those changes were, and I can open it up for any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
What kind of coordination does this go through with the community? And both of these are kind of tribal related, so is there a coordinating group that
There
works
is.
on these?
Yeah, there is a archaeologist on the project. That's with ECOR. They're the ones who wrote the archaeological treatment plan. We also have a cultural monitoring contract with Agua Caliente tribe. And they've been in review of our archaeological treatment plan that is based on the addendum and in agreement with finalizing that plan. So they're well aware of this. The sensitive areas out there are areas that are sensitive to Agua Caliente tribe, so they're well aware of this, and we've been definitely making sure that they're on board with how the project is proceeding.
Okay, good, thanks. Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the certification of the mitigated negative declaration.
Second.
Good. That covers it. discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passed 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. All right, next. Go ahead.
The next item here is a request of the board to certify the mitigated negative declaration for the Avenue 66 trunk sewer project. With this, we also have the MMRP, the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan, and a request of the board to authorize staff to file a notice of determination with Riverside County Clerk and State Clearinghouse. This is, we also have an optional presentation if you're interested. This project is very similar to a lot of the different MNDs for projects that you've seen, where we identify mitigation measures for the project to reduce all impacts from the project to less than significant. This project is located in the Torres Martinez Indian Reservation. We did receive one comment during our public comment period in regards to the assessment of cultural resources. Some of the resources in this area are registered historical resources. And so one of their comments was to develop additional mitigations to help protect those cultural resources by better identifying in a phase 2 cultural resources study where the potential resources may be unearthed and unknown, and then also having a data recovery plan in place to deal with any inadvertent discoveries that may be encountered. Overall, there's several resources on this project that will require mitigation measures that are included in the document and in the MMRP that will be followed by the contractor during construction. Those resource topics include aesthetics, biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, hazardous materials, noise, and traffic. And with that, I'll open it up for questions, or we can go ahead and go through the optional presentation.
So I have one question. I don't know if I need to go through the presentation, but the question is what triggers going from a mitigated negative declaration and preparing this mitigation monitoring and program to a full-on CEQA document? I mean, what?
Yeah, the next step would be an environmental impact report, or an EIR, and typically those are done when you're unable to mitigate those projects to less than significant. Your project has impacts that need a further level of analysis, further information to analyze.
And are those outside questions or pressure that tell us that we were more than significant, or do we internally determine that we have more than significant?
We usually make the determination, and most of the time that is not questioned. But during public review, if somebody from the public or commenter disagrees with that, they would make that comment. And we did not receive any comment like that.
Okay, all right. No, thank you.
I just got a question. So, we've got some trailer parks and communities out there. We take the line right to the property, and then they connect on from there, or is that how it's done? Just
Yeah.
so I know. Okay.
That's right. And Armando's here
So-
to describe the connections, but that is my understanding that, there's a service agreement for those mobile home parks.
And so they will get hooked up to it once it's there?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's good.
There's also stub outs, I think, for future expansion. But I know one of the key hookups that was planned for this project was a Sunbird Mobile Home Community Park that was a disadvantaged community that was identified as being a key reason for this project.
So when it says collect average flows under the Avenue 66 sewer project summary, when it says collect average flows of 25,800 gallons with a capacity of 85,000, that 25,000 would
existing.
be for everybody that's there right now. So if, once you put the project in and everybody hooks up with who's existing right there, then the 25,000, so there'll be a capacity there of, say, 60,000 in the future.
I think that's right.
Is that
Armando.
Yeah.
Good morning. Armando Rodriguez, Engineering Manager with the Engineering Department. Good question. Thank you very much. You know, the target for this project is the Sunbird Mobile Home Park and also the Torres Martinez Center. We estimate with those flows that you just mentioned that we have about 110 connections that we're trying to target, and that will be the phase one of this project. The pipeline will be sized for regional growth, you know, so we do anticipate installing a 10-inch, an 8-inch, and then so those additional connections that are already part of this future regional effect will be a phase two project that we will have to come back to the state and apply for more grants. Right now, all we have is the granting for Sunbird and for Torres Martinez, but then part of that grant also is going to pay for upsizing of the pipe as well to cover future connections.
So my question is, so we're set up for?
We are set up for
We're set up, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And there's a project in that vicinity that the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition is working on for additional affordable housing. And I think that's been taken into consideration.
Absolutely, that's been taken into
And it's also another potential project that the county's looking to invest some ARPA money to allow for that project to continue to move forward. So it's a good project for the region.
Great.
Just a small question, it might be an error on slide, I think slide 9, they're not numbered. It says that March 2019, CVWD initiated consultation with 8 Native American tribal governments. 8? Where do we find 8? Is that real? Do you know?
What, we have a list of tribes that have requested to be notified for all CVWD projects. And there's a request for consultation that goes out to these 8 standing tribes. And typically, we only get a request to go through the consultation process from maybe 1 or 2. So they weren't all actually completed consultations, but
Right.
they're initiated.
Huh, interesting.
Traditional use area for the tribes on the other side of the mountain.
Going towards San Diego? Interesting. Yeah.
Those
but-
are their migration routes and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's not gonna be a lot of work, it's just a standing process to notify them.
Right.
Fair enough. Right? Anything else? Motion to approve 9B? I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second. And all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, that passed. Good, thanks, William. North Indio flood, so we're looking at long-term financing. Carrie Swaney.
Good morning again.
Again?
So this board action item is actually being brought to you in coordination with the engineering department. So the purpose of this action item is to seek board approval for staff to proceed in issuing a $60 million debt to finance the North Indio Flood Control Project Phase 2. So staff and PFM have worked together in evaluating multiple funding scenarios. We took into consideration making sure that we met debt service coverage. We had sufficient reserves to meet the target reserves as stated in our policy, along with an additional $20 million reserve that's required by WIFIA. So with that, I actually have Darren Hodge online to help go through the process and then explain the financing plan based on the current market and interest rate environment that we have. And should you have any additional questions after the presentation, Carrie Oliphant, myself, and Darren are available to answer questions.
Good,
So I'm
thank
going to
you.
turn it over to Darren.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. If we could turn to the first slide, please. And so the first thing I want to do is just quickly go over a market update. Obviously, everyone's been following what's been going on in the market, but just kind of a big picture overview. Over the last 2 to 3 months, what we've experienced is an increase in interest rates. Now, the main reasons for this are really twofold. One of the primary reasons at the beginning of this year was inflationary concerns that investors had. And the second was potential actions by the Federal Reserve in terms of the expectations that they'd be increasing the Fed funds rate. Now, those two factors have impacts on different points of the curve. Obviously, the Fed funds target rate is a short-term rate, so that more affected the short end of the curve. But the inflationary concerns among investors affected primarily a lot more of the curve. And so what you started seeing was upward pressure on interest rates. Now, more recently, over the last month, the conflict in Ukraine has caused additional investor concern. And so all of these factors combined have resulted in some pretty material increases in interest rates here over the last few months. Now, anytime we talk about interest rates and increases, one of the things we have to do is we have to take into account kind of where we stand from the historical basis. Because over the last 2 to 3 years, we've been in a very, very low interest rate environment. Near historical lows, setting historically low records at various points. And so what we're showing on this slide right here is a representation of where current market interest rates stand versus where interest rates have ranged over the last 40 years. So if you look at these gray bars here, what those represent is the fluctuation in interest rates at various points along the curve since 1981. Those blue lines right there that might be a little bit difficult to see, but about a little shorter than half of those gray lines, that's the historical average of where each spot rate has been over the last 40 years. And if you see towards the bottom, there's that green line. That's currently where interest rates are. And so that's what I mean by when we talk about increases in interest rates, we also have to keep in mind kind of where we stand from a historical perspective, because as we'll talk about in a little while, even with these rate increases for our proposed borrowing, we'd still be borrowing at fairly attractive rates. Next slide, please. So while I just showed the historical ranges, I wanted to give you a little bit more granular review of just really what's occurred over the last 12 months. And on the left, we have the U.S. Treasury market, but I really want to focus here on the right, which is the MMD rates. MMD stands for Municipal Market Data Index. Effectively what that is, that's the tax-exempt index against which we sell municipal bonds. And so as you can see, I've plotted out 4 different lines here. The green line at the very bottom, that's 1-year MMD, and the blue line at the very top is 30-year MMD. And as you can see, starting at the beginning of this year, that's when we started to see those increases, with the short end of the curve increasing more than the long term of the curve, mostly because of additional news and expectations of what the Federal Reserve might do with the Fed funds target rate. So why don't we turn to the next slide and talk a little bit about what that means for the proposed financing. So what we are bringing forward today for an informational item is we will be bringing this back to the board for formal approval in late April. But what we wanted to do today was just kind of go through what the Series 2022A bonds would finance, what they would look like, and what the cost would be. So at this point, what we are contemplating and proposing is about a $60 million financing. That transaction would price and close in early May, and the current thought is that we'd structure this pretty conservatively with a 30-year final maturity and level annual debt service payments. In today's market, if we were to sell that, and when I say today, it's actually as of March 10th, just the timing to submit things, the true interest cost, or the rate at which we would borrow, is about 3.5%. So again, higher than we would have been 4 to 5 months ago, but still from a historical perspective, still fairly attractive. And the other important component to this is that when we talk about the debt service repayments, what does that mean in terms of a cash flow? Well, based off a $60 million transaction for 30 years, our average annual debt service payment every year would be about $3.3 million. So now that we've gone through the economics, I want to talk a little bit about what we factor in when we try to determine how much we should sell, when we should sell, etc. So anytime we sell bonds, we take a look at a number of factors. One of the first things we take a look at is obviously what's the affordability of the bonds that we're issuing. And then hand in hand with that is what are the ratings impact of this additional debt issuance. Currently, the stormwater system is very highly rated, AAA by Fitch and AA plus from S&P. And so as we layer on additional debt, we want to know what's the potential impact of this from a rating agency perspective, because ratings are the primary factor that drive at what interest rate we're able to borrow. The other thing that we monitor from now all the way through pricing is what do market conditions look like? Is it a favorable market? Is it a deteriorating market, et cetera? And obviously the last thing that kind of goes hand in hand with affordability is what's the impact on our future financial flexibility? Because once we issue debt, that is a hard cost. We have to make that payment every year versus more of a pay-go approach to project financing, which is a little bit more flexible, but obviously has some pros and cons with that, obviously, just with the large size of the project that we're contemplating here. Next slide, please. So as part of the financing process, I just want to talk a little about the underwriter selection process that we undertook. So in January, on behalf of the district, PFM distributed an underwriter RFP, and we distributed it to a list of about 18 investment banks. The RFP was due on February 8th, and we received 7 responses, and we've laid out the firms that responded. Citigroup, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Ramirez & Company, Stifel, Siebert Williams Shank, and Wells Fargo. Now, the district and PFM reviewed all these responses and based the review on 4 criteria. The first was relevant experience. The second was proposed plan of finance, the marketing plan, and the discussion of credit. The third was a demonstrated understanding of Coachella Valley Water District and our project's needs. And the fourth criteria were fees. In mid-February, 17th and 18th, PFM and the district met. We discussed the RFPs received and reviewed them, and ultimately decided based off the scoring and the criteria review that JP Morgan was the winning bidding underwriter. And so for this transaction, the proposal is to proceed with JP Morgan as the underwriter for the bonds. Next slide, please. And please feel free, as I walk through this, please feel free to interrupt. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to walk through those. So now what I want to do is talk a little bit about when we mentioned earlier the issuance of debt. One of the first things we look at is what's the impact on our financial picture going forward. And so what we did is we built a model and then tried to project out what would be the impact of this additional debt issuance and how much debt would we need to issue to afford the 5-year CIP plan, as well as maintain strong ratings and meet all the criteria that Carrie Swain had talked about with regards to reserves and debt service coverage. So anytime we do a pro forma, assumptions are probably one of the most critical factors in the analysis. And so I want to just outline some of the key assumptions that we use. So given that the stormwater system's primary funding source is the property tax, that's probably the most important component. And what we assumed is a property tax revenue growth of about 2% per year. And for purposes of earnings rate, given the reserves that we have on hand, we assumed a 1.5% interest earnings rate on that. And then for purposes of the O&M, we assumed a growth rate of annually about 4.07%. So those are the fundamentals of the projections. Obviously, if those change, it affects the outcome of the model, but it feels like in discussions with the district, those are fairly conservative assumptions for purposes of this analysis. Now, in terms of the CIP projects, the 2 largest projects that were financed within the pro forma model were obviously the North Indio Regional Flood Control System as well as the Coachella Valley Stormwater Channel Improvement. There are additional projects that were incorporated within the feasibility analysis, but obviously, future projects are subject to project readiness, board direction, availability of funds, et cetera. 2 parameters that we used to solve for feasibility was a minimum net debt service coverage ratio of about 2 times. The reason that we used a 2 times debt service coverage target is because the property tax revenues for stormwater are a little bit different than when we look at domestic water, sanitation, et cetera. We don't have as much control over the rate at which the property tax rate is set. And as such, we need to maintain a higher debt service coverage ratio because that's really what protects investors in terms of repayment. And so the higher debt service coverage ratio will help us maintain very strong ratings. The other target that we looked at was our minimum reserve target. And where we tried to target reserves was a level of $20 million above our total reserve targets. Essentially, that's our reserve policy target. The reason that we looked at that number is because within the WIFIA loan that we executed with EPA for stormwater, they had a requirement. Well, let me rephrase that. Not a requirement, but they had what they call a notification level, where if reserves fell below a level of $20 million above our targeted reserve levels, we're required to notify them. And the reason that that was included in the loan by EPA was because, again, the fact that the stormwater property tax, we can't really increase the levy rate on that. Reserves were very important for EPA from a lender's protection perspective, and so that's why they insisted that that provision be within the loan. And so we wanted to make sure to maintain that within the funding level so that we didn't breach that notification level. Turn to the next slide, please. And so based off those assumptions and those metrics, this is really kind of a look at what the pro forma came out at. And so when we looked at how much debt to issue, the $60 million provided a good mix of funding the projects currently within the preliminary 5-year CIP, as well as ensuring that we maintained the reserve levels that we were expecting and still left us with a pretty good debt service coverage ratio. And so if you look here on the left, that table right there, that chart, that's our debt service coverage. Those gray lines represent the debt service after the issuance of the proposed 2022 bonds, and there's two lines. The first one is that orange line. That represents what we call our gross coverage. The gross coverage is effectively our gross revenues divided by debt service. The reason that I show that is because that's technically what is pledged to investors. They're paid on a gross basis or before we pay O&M. Then below that, you see the other line that looks gray. That's our net debt service coverage. The reason that I include that is because net debt service coverage is effectively how many times do we cover our debt with net revenues or after O&M expenses are paid. And even though investors are paid prior to O&M, rating agencies look at our debt service coverage on a net basis as well. And so that's why we wanted to maintain that minimum 2 times net debt service coverage. And you can see with the assumptions that we had, that net debt service coverage remains above that 2 times level for the foreseeable future. Now on the right, the other thing that we wanted to show is if you remember when we were talking about the issues of debt, effectively we create a hard obligation. And what I meant by that was we are creating debt service payments that we have to make every year. And so we want to make sure that going forward, those additional debt service payments aren't kind of taking us into a situation where our net revenues go into the red. And based off this forecast, we're showing that going forward, you'd see annual net revenues of about $10 million per year. Again, that's based on a 2% increase in property tax revenues. In all likelihood, you'll probably see more than that. And so you might see the annual net revenues increase in the future, which then allows for the funding of additional CIP projects, whether it's through PAYGO or additional debt. With that, I'll pause and just see if anyone has any questions, or Terry, if there was anything that you wanted to add.
I have one question. This is Director Aguilar. You mentioned in one of the previous slides, under the structure of the bond, a 10-year call date. And can you talk more about that? And does changing that call date affect the pricing either way?
Yes, sir. No, excellent question. And thank you, Carrie, for flipping to that slide. So what the 10-year call date is, that's effectively a early redemption feature whereby in 10 years we have the option to refinance that debt if interest rates are lower. Now, to your point, Director, we can change that call date. We could have a 5-year call date. We could have an 8-year call date. We could have a longer call date. 10 years is the market standard. And the impact of changing that call date, if we have a shorter call date, i.e., let's just say it's 7 or 8 years, what you're going to see is that increases our TIC. So right now, with a 10-year call date, our TIC is 3.5. We had a call date, and I don't have numbers in front of me, so I'm just example here. Your might be 3.75%. And the reason for that is because if you don't call those bonds on the initial call date, you get more expensive to maturity. And so the reason that we use 10 years is that provides a pretty good mix of future refinancing flexibility and overall cost.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good enough. Good, all right, well, good presentation. I'm just curious on this slide where our average annual debt service is about almost 3.3 million. Do we know the difference between what it would have been 2 months ago with the lower rate or 3 months ago or whatever? Obviously it went up sort of since the first of the year.
No, excellent question, sir. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but what I will do, I'll take a look at what rates were 4 months ago. I'll run those out, get those over to Jeff and Carrie, and make sure that the board receives those.
Yeah, just kind of curious about the sensitivity of it. And so this is based on March 10th rates?
Correct.
And so when are we, let's say everything moves forward on a normal pace, what date do you think we would actually be getting?
Or our goal is.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out there. Sorry,
Close
you
the
were
week
cutting
of
out
May
there.
9th?
Could you say that one more time?
No, I think it's on there. So it priced the week of May 2nd. I got it. That's the answer. So about 2 more months after this. All right.
And we're locked in at those right now?
Not the
No,
355.
not right now. No, not for 355. It's going to be based on how we sell on May 2nd. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. All right, thank you. Anything else? So,
Do we need a motion to
yes.
approve the plan to move forward? I'd so move that authorize the staff to proceed with the long-term financing plan.
I'll second.
all right, good. Anything else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passed. 5-0. More. Good, all right. Keep going, Carrie. You're
Yeah,
on
sorry.
D.
So the next item is related to our annual unclaimed monies that we have to present to board for approval. So we are planning to post on the paper on this coming weekend and the following weekend. Attached on the BAI is the list of items that is currently unclaimed. And they have 45 days from the first posting, which is on March 25th, to come to the district and claim the funds. And if they do not claim it, then those funds, since we are a water agency special district, those money comes back to the district. So we don't have to remit it to the state. So this is just, if you have any additional questions.
And we've done sufficient reach out to these people.
Yes.
And we haven't been able to get in contact.
Yes, yeah, we do, we mandatorily have to do a due diligence. So if it's a customer, we work with customer service, they make sure that they didn't just move to another account. So we've kind of cleaned that up as well. And then same thing with developers, if there's any developer deposits or refunds that has not been claimed in the last 3 years, then we also do. So due diligence, Googling them, make sure the business is whether active or not active, and reach out to them.
Well, I didn't see my name on there, so.
I'll be honest, I don't see anybody I know.
I didn't see anybody I knew
I
either.
know.
We already
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
90.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
$23,000 is more trouble than it's worth.
Some of them are about $3,000. You think they'd want it? Okay, Jeff. Good morning.
Good morning, President Powell, members of the board. Last July, the board authorized execution of an agreement with NewGen Strategies for a cost service study for our sanitation services. We began work last August collecting revenue, expense data, customer data on water and usage, also operations and capital needs, was a huge focus for the future during not only the 5 years, but the 5 years beyond the window of the study. This is our fourth time we're coming to the board. The first review was given to the board on January 18th, a study session where we gave an initial preview of where we wanted the board to see where it looked like where rate recommendations were going. At the board's initial direction at that study, we began looking at how we could shift capital expenditures from the 5-year window out into future years in order to keep rates as low as possible to customers while still providing all of the services that we needed for maintaining our services. Board input and direction were received at an additional study session on February 15th, where the capital program in the 5-year study window was reduced to $208 million, and the remaining $293 million was pushed out to the next 7 years. We had another touch base with the board at the March 8th board meeting, and that brings us to today where we're asking for the receiving of the final draft report and the authorization of the mailing of Prop 218 notices to customers. This will begin the 45-day mandatory period of noticing. So as soon as, assuming we get a positive approval from the board today, we'll tell the printers, start working, and be ready to mail out notices by Friday. That'll give us 45 days before we come back to the board in May, on May 10th. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the NewGen team, members of the finance staff, and also the help of various departments throughout the district for the past 9 months or so. I'd also like to mention that Eric Colokia, the lead consultant from NewGen, is on the line and is available to answer any questions of the board, final questions that remain. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
I know we've been through this a few times. Appreciate the responsiveness to get it down to where it is.
And we will have a public hearing for this.
No, I know, and this is not adopting any rates.
No,
This is just the process. So we'll have that also.
Yes,
At
sir.
a future date. All right. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I have a really quick question. Maybe there's a quick answer for it. On the recommended service sewer charges, could you just quickly remind me the difference, the main reason for the difference between the residential and the RV trailer park monthly count charge?
Sure, I'll let Eric field that question for you.
I'm sorry, the microphone cut out there. I didn't.
Yeah,
hear most of the
I
question.
wanted a reminder of the main driver behind the difference in monthly account charge from residential to RV trailer parks.
Sure. So the monthly account charge is calculated with two components. The first is a customer service component that is spread equally amongst all customers. The second is a billing cost component. And because residential customers are on the tax roll, the amount allocated to them is based on a one annual bill, whereas RV trailer parks and commercial customers are billed monthly, so they get allocated 12 bills per year. And that is the result of that is a different cost allocation for billing costs between those customer classes.
Looks like 20 cents a month.
All right, I don't think I understood what you just said, but I think we have some time to bring this back, and so I'll look at it and have a better question next time. Thank you.
Yeah, so it basically reflects an internal cost to do monthly billing for RV parks and trailers.
Right, the
Where the
monthly
residential
bill,
supply
the
to
cost to bill monthly is higher than the
Yeah,
cost to bill
I got that
annually,
once
and
versus
that's reflected
12
in those
times.
charges.
Yeah. So it's a couple bucks a month more.
Yes.
240.
Okay, well, I'll look at it. I'll have better comments next time. Thank you.
I wonder why it's set up that way.
It's been that way for as long as I've been here, that residential was done through the property tax. You know, what we had tried to do a few times is look at moving all of the billing to the tax, but the problem is there tends to be more of a turnover in commercial, and it's just the way it's calculated, variances in water use. I don't have a really good answer for that, because I wasn't involved in the analysis.
There must be a reason for it.
So when we, the property, it's much more efficient to transfer the residential to the property tax. It's a very low cost. For the monthly billing, we actually have to send out a monthly bill, and so that's primarily the driver. There are expenses associated with mailing a monthly bill versus the property tax transfer.
So have we looked at moving others to the property tax? I guess
Yeah,
is
we've
it?
even considered thinking about doing that for all of domestic, because it would be, but then you're gonna have, on the monthly service charge, but then you're gonna have individual, people getting a bill for $1. If they use 1 unit of water.
No,
So-
he's saying moving the commercial and the RV.
Oh, yeah, well, the
to-
commercial, yeah, that,
Sanitation.
So it has to do with what he was
Yeah, and
talking
that
about,
changes-
there's just so much turnaround, it would be.
yeah, that changes all the time. I mean, we frequently have new commercial accounts.
Is
and-
the residential a fixed charge, or it's also volumetric based on?
It's fixed.
It's fixed versus
Right.
all the others volumetric. It's a lot easier to put a report together with a fixed charge over
Right.
thousands of accounts.
But
Yeah.
if you have a variable charge, it's hard to get that on the tax
To get
roll.
on and say this one's so much, this one's so much, this one, they're all gonna be the same.
That's
Right.
a good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we need a motion to approve this.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, well, thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Yeah, that passed 5-0. Okay, so, public hearing now. Surprise. At
Wait,
this,
it doesn't say public hearing. I'm sorry.
We will work on that internally on how to
I don't get the script
coordinate
until I
that
get
Is there an
it
echo in here?
All right, so we're on to 10A, which is an ordinance. At this time, staff will provide a presentation on the proposed ordinance 1399.15, regulations governing domestic water service. Following the presentation, we will open the public hearing. Making the presentation this morning is Adam McWay, management analyst with the Service and Communication Department. Adam?
Good morning, President Powell and members of the board. So staff have developed the proposed updates to the regulations governing domestic water service to improve consistency across ordinances, resolutions, and policies, as well as improve clarity and transparency. A red line version of the domestic regulations has been provided for your reference that details all of the proposed changes. I can summarize those changes at this time, or we can skip to specific questions that you may have.
Well, we've already acted on this correctly in terms of the previous,
The informational item?
yeah.
Well, this is actually adopting the changes. I can speak to what Scott was talking about earlier about the proposed change in the regs that would kind of speaks to conservation. So that's specifically the proposed updates to Part 6 in the request for account review process. So what we're proposing there is to revise the regulations so that adjustments are limited to the consumption above the customer's actual historical norm for that period. And we're also proposing to impose limits on how large those adjustments can be for Class 50 landscape accounts. So we're proposing a limit of a $5,000 adjustment.
So again, I think in the past, what we had allowed is when someone experiences high consumption, they can come in for an analysis, and if there was a documented repair, we would allow one adjustment every 12 months, but if there was no documented repair, I think it's one every 12 months, and then no documented repair, it was once every 5 years, I think is the way
So,
that.
yeah, and so currently, if you do get an adjustment, the way it works is you can adjust up to the maximum of the past 60 days, and it's all rebilled at a tier 2, so all the consumption. So what we're proposing is to limit that adjustment to what is that theoretically is occurred as a result of that leak. So on that consumption above your historical norm. So we've seen, I guess, around November, a lot of adjustments. So, and rather than adjusting the entire consumption, since the purpose of it is really to provide customers an opportunity, if they do have an unexpected water loss or leak, to adjust their bill. But it's not meant to be an automatic adjustment once a year to reduce your bill or expected use.
So if someone has a historical average of, say, $200 in the month of November, okay, and for some reason they have a leak and that bill goes to 500, then you're going to adjust that between the 5 and the 2. You're going to that's going to be.
Yeah. So if consistently they use every October, November, about 50 units of water, and then they do have a leak and it results in 100, we'll adjust that 50 over their historical norm of 50, rather than giving them adjustment for the full 100.
Then you take the 50 and just bill it at the tier 2 rate instead of the higher tier.
Right.
So it's not free. So how is $5,000 a problem for us? I mean, have we had bigger adjustments?
There have been some rather large adjustments. I think over $100,000 on some large HOAs that found a leak. And,
HOAs.
And so yeah, so the 5,000, that's specific to just Class 50 landscape accounts. I think in the past couple years, adopting that change would only have impacted 5 adjustments. So.
I guess we lost.
When you're done with the set of questions, I do have some.
Go ahead. I'm done.
Okay, so, I've been meaning to get a sense of some of this, I think. I don't know if it's fully captured in here, but I know that there's been a number of laws, and I think there continues to be some legislation at the state to allow for these additional dwelling units, ADUs they're calling them, making it easier for folks to add, even detached buildings. I think they're trying to figure out how to meet housing quotas or things like that. And I haven't quite understood how we handle that as it relates to when we collect additional fees, whether we require a separate connection, whether it's a meter or sewer connection, and then at what point do we assess additional fees? So is any of that captured in here? And I mention it because I do see some definitions that were added for ADUs. I think there was something related to size.
So
changes have created, meet the demand, the changes have created. So in general, is that captured in here, or do we need to continue to try to develop how we handle that?
So in general, I mean, we addressed that a year or so ago when we had updated the sanitation regulations, and so we added language in there on consistent with the state regulations on when a new sewer connection would be required and what fees would be charged based on what type. And that's why there's the 3 different definitions for accessory dwelling units. That's kind of based on how the state law is written. So there's that, if it's built along with the new construction of a building, attached to the existing structure, or separate. And so that's what those kind of three definitions are. So we've added those definitions to the domestic regulations just to be consistent with the sanitation, but I don't believe there was anything in these proposed updates specific to other than adding those definitions.
Yeah, I think our policy right now is if someone comes in and asks, or they're permitted to do an ADU, they have a choice of either having a separate water line or tie into the existing water line. If they tie into the existing water line, they basically do that on the private side. There's no fee collection. If they want a new meter, it's the whole 9 yards. But that's up to them.
And then on the sewer, same?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the sewer, so I'd have to defer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyways,
the
I just,
sewer
in
is the
general,
same.
but I think in general, that's what I wanted
Yeah.
to, I know we're on domestic, so we kind of, we leave it to the property owner to decide.
Yes.
You want to connect, you run
You
the
pay the
private.
full fee.
If you want to run private plumbing to the existing meter, nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
You want a new connection, it's everything.
Now, we will have to do flow calculations, make sure we're not gonna burn out the meter. You know, if it's a 3/4 inch, the addition of a larger ADU may cause a problem. If it's a 1-inch meter, there's less of a risk, but we have had folks running nurseries off of a 3/4 inch meter, which then burns the meter out, and then the reads aren't accurate.
Then the water's free.
It's a much reduced cost, yes.
Okay, and so how are nurseries handled here? What are you?
So that's what we've added a definition in part 1 to define what a nursery, what we'll consider a nursery. And then we've also added, what is it in part 6-2.4.2, so item number 10, and that's where we will allow a nursery to increase their water budget, essentially, by a specific factor, and as long as they meet the definition of a nursery, as well as install the necessary infrastructure to appropriately irrigate that nursery, whether that be adding a meter, splitting the meters, and installing a backflow.
Okay, all right, thank you for clarifying.
So, there's a lot here. I'm not, to tell you the truth, not real comfortable with all of this because of the amount of information that's here. I mean, this is a lot of information to go through. I want to ask, so on the account delinquency, so we want to raise that.
So that's the point at which we begin charging late fees and the delinquency charge. So currently, you aren't charged any late fees or delinquencies until you have a delinquent balance of at least $25. So we're proposing to increase that minimum balance to $75. So no late fees or charges will hit a delinquent account until they have that minimum balance.
It's an efficiency thing.
I'm not chasing small dollars.
So, tell me again on the 5,000, how many accounts did we have that?
So I have,
what period?
just in the past, so in last year, 2021, let's see, there were 3 accounts that would have been impacted by that. So the largest had an initial bill of just under $43,000. After receiving the adjustment, that bill went down to just over $9,000. So by having this, they wouldn't have been eligible for $4,000 in adjustment. The other 2 from last year, the impact was just around over $1,000. That wouldn't have been eligible for the adjustment. In 2020, it was just 2 accounts, and both of those, the impact, their bill after their adjustments were right under $7,000, so it was more about 2. So we haven't had any of those very large ones, but I guess kind of the point of having that is we don't want it to be the rule that you automatically receive a $100,000 adjustment. Anybody still has the opportunity to come before the board and ask for a special treatment if there was a serious leak, and we just want them to have to provide more backup than broken sprinkler receipt.
Yeah, I get it. Okay. Thank you. More?
So 8.4 and 8.5, when we're talking about special provisions for domestic water pipeline extensions and the construction of new domestic water infrastructure by district, I mean, what is this? Requires a developer to construct a small water main to connect if the closest main is larger than 12 inches. So what is that change?
So, engineering can speak specifically to that. My understanding is those are just consistent with best practices and adopted ordinances already. So I don't know.
I guess just for and I know you're gonna come up and explain, but if it's not something we're already doing, would we just say, okay, well, you need an 8, but we want a 12, and we pay for the difference? Because it sounds to me like in a lot of cases we pay for upsizing, and so now what we're trying to do is say you're completely responsible for the size of the line. Is that?
So it's not really recommended that a single domestic service be connected to a larger segment of pipe, like an 18-inch or 24-inch transmission main. So that was the point, is that they would have to create a smaller stub for that service rather than having a big connection or a saddle on an 18 or 24-inch pipe. So it's kind of consistent with construction standards.
So it's not really upsizing. It sounds like where there's an existing, an existing main, and you want to have new service onto the existing main, we're requiring the developer.
So off a transmission pipeline, you want to install a distribution pipeline, store a stub out.
Yes.
In order to have the proper connection there, which is probably gonna add cost to the connection.
But that's for like a single service.
It mostly applies to single service.
Okay, which is very
rare.
Is that very unique? It sounds.
Yeah,
like
it's very rare. If it's a large subdivision, typically they're already building
an 8-inch coming off of it or something.
Yeah, an 8 or 10, 12-inch off the 18 or 24.
Okay.
But if it was in a rural area where you have transmission going by and the guy says, I want to connect, then it's going to be more expensive for that person.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
And then also where it talks about removes the option for the district to construct water main extensions less than 500 feet. What is that?
My understanding, we have not constructed any mains for any developers that we have conditioned all developers to build the extensions.
So now you're basically just removing even the option.
Correct.
But we haven't done it.
We have not done that.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify my earlier question, which I don't think I expressed very well. So in the staff report, the impression that I was left with is that the regulations that you're talking to us about today, in terms of incorporating those changes into this ordinance, are already in place. Is that not correct? Or are we talking about implementing, like accessory dwelling units? Are any of those items that we're acting on today not been acted on previously?
So all the proposed red lines, I guess, are proposed additions or changes to the existing ordinance.
And do those change our practices in those particular areas?
Yeah, and clarifying existing practices and just making it more transparent in the regulations. So,
and if I may.
Sounds like a combination.
So, it's a combination of action this board took to adopt rates and charges. You're incorporating those into the rules and regs.
Yeah, we acted on those.
Right.
Okay.
Then you have things that are already state law, ADUs, for example. That's being incorporated or updated. That's not something the board would take action on. And then 3, practicalities of the situation about when you do extend the line or not, updating that. So it's all 3 of those things, and it's only done on an annual basis, so we're not coming every month with some rule change.
Thank you, Jeff. That helps.
Yeah, so I know it's, speaking to Director Bianco's point, it's a lot of information, but that's, was an effort by staff to coordinate across all the departments to try to do this in one action rather than bringing these regulations every month to be updated, since there is a noticing requirements, the hearing and whatnot.
So in part 12, the water management's all deleted. Where is that, all the new verbiage for that section? Are you taking that section out?
So that language is just, it's still within the regulations, it's just been moved, I believe mostly to part 4 and part 6.
Also, can you give me an example of the meter obstruction charge?
Yes, so
And
the meter
it
obstruction
doesn't say what the
charge.
charge is going to be? Does it say in there what the
Yeah,
charge?
so I believe that the actual charge has been added to dependency, what, 24? It's typically, they explain, it's usually only around 10 a year occurrences, and it's either landscaping, new or old, that's overgrown over the box, meters behind locked gates that we don't have access to, and it can be difficult to get customer participation to get behind the gate to read the meter, and so there's a lot of work by staff to follow up with the customer, try to schedule a time to get behind the gate or get access, and right now there's currently no incentive or penalties, I guess, and it results in frequent adjustment or estimated billings and whatnot.
And also this was driven primarily because there are instances where customers, one of them, for example, had a car parked over the meter and up on blocks with no tires, and we weren't able to get a read. They didn't pay. We had to get the city's code enforcement involved, and this is typically what happens. We have to get code enforcement involved so that we can have the car removed so we can even read the meter. And it becomes a problem. So this happens about 10 times a year. And most of them, if it's a landscaping issue, we can take care of that easily enough, and that's not really a problem. But if we have to go through code enforcement and other measures to be able to even read the meter, then that's when we would like to impose it.
Yeah, that's all reasonable. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that we're not approving the district that, for instance, someone has excess of weeds in the meter at the front of their house, and we look at it and say, oh, well, send them a bill.
The board is never going to hear about a complaint about
Okay.
this, I can assure you.
Just double checking. 'Cause
Yeah, no.
I'm gonna throw this out there. I don't know how much support I'm gonna get, but I'd like to keep 8.5 the option of the 500 feet. I don't know. I feel good about options, and if we're not using it, we're not using it. But I'd like to keep it as an option. Maybe there's a time and a day when we want to have that option, and so I'd like to keep it. So that's a request.
Well, so I guess it's an option during plan check, more so than anything else, before we even have a customer. And then this is what makes the discussions with developers a little bit more
They point at it.
difficult, because they say, well, the option is there, and I think the district ought to do that. And it's like, well,
They're still paying for it, though.
well, then it probably
Yeah, they-
becomes a scheduling problem based on our availability. I'm not sure I'm just speculating here and giving staff time the opportunity to come to the microphone and save me.
Thank you, I'm
Save
here.
them, save Jim.
So, if it's a developer's responsibility and he wants service, and the main is 500 feet away, then it's his responsibility to extend the line.
So I get I get that's the viewpoint now. So can you help me understand why it was an option at one time? Why did we feel that made sense at one time?
I don't know, but what it does is it causes a gray area and confusion.
Sure, I could see
So
that.
then when a developer comes in, it says, oh, but
Yeah.
there's an option here and
Sure.
you could do the work. Well, yeah, if we have a project and the pipeline's going to be installed, you know, along that frontage, then we'll do it as part of a CIP project. But we're not gonna do it specifically for a developer. So we're just trying to remove the gray area.
Part of so when I got here, it was my understanding that one of the reasons why we had the golden handshake after the recession is because district staff was doing an inordinate amount of work for private developers to the tune of about, one estimate I heard was $40 million worth of money was being paid to the district to do work that was a developer's responsibility. And I just said, when I became general manager, we are not doing that anymore. We have our own priorities. Our workforce is based on our needs. We are not going to start subsidizing developers for things that they ought to be paying for themselves. It also then creates scheduling problems, priorities. Developers always want things done yesterday. And, you know, it just didn't make sense to me to provide that type of service when we had no control over it at all.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I get what you're saying. You know, us acting as their contractor. You know, this is 500 feet. I was just trying to get a sense of perhaps what the agency was trying to accomplish back then, or why is it even there if it just didn't make sense?
I don't know, it was
So-
a previous director.
No, I get it. I'm just, you know, I'm thinking out loud. I'm thinking, was there a benefit to that? Were we trying to accomplish something? So, you know, I'm not, if it needs to get removed, I'm fine with it. If it's an option and it's not being used, for me, I like options, but if you're saying that it just causes issues with developers pointing at it as a,
It does.
you know, so I'm okay with getting rid of it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
One more, can we also just explain to me a little bit on where it says water budgets? I mean, it says that this doesn't change how water budgets are calculated, but then the next sentence, I don't really understand what that means.
So we just wanted to add as much information as possible on how customers' water budgets are calculated. So that's what we've done in, I believe it's, what, part 5?
515.
515.
Yeah, so we're not changing the formula or the calculations or the computers on how the water budgets are calculated. We're just adding information into the regulations, clarifying how they are calculated. So we've added with that table of the plant factors, we added a better description of how the ETO is used in calculating your water budget. What else did we do?
So basically, all you're trying to do is make it a little bit easier for the customer to understand how you got to the water budget.
How we calculate the water budget, but we're not actually changing anything on how it is formulated.
So all the red lines through that, the water budget area, it's not changing any way that, in any fashion, how we're calculating the budget itself.
Correct.
Or making it,
So I believe, like, some of this
it's not allowing us to go in there and recalculate it because we've changed the language.
No. So, for instance, the ETOs are the same as adopted in the ETO map ordinance years back. We're just adding those actual figures into these regulations, so it's easier for customers to find. It's in this one, hopefully consolidated document. That's part of the effort also, is to get everything in one place, so it's easier for everyone, staff, customers, to find.
And we're doing this because customers are asking for clarification on how we calculate the budgets?
We're actually, part of why we're doing, the biggest reason we're doing that is because there were multiple ordinances that had conflicting information out there and hadn't been updated. So I found 3 different ordinances that were approved by the board that had different calculations. So this is an effort to get it in one place for, not only for customers, but also for staff. So we can understand, and that was the effort. It's not, nobody's water budget is gonna change as a result of what you do today. This is just getting the information in fully in one place.
Did I miss anything else?
Can I?
There's a lot of changes in here.
No, well, and most of the changes, as you know, Jeff pointed it out, most of these changes were already approved, adopted by the board in previous ordinances. We're consolidating them into one place, and it's been an effort, and it's honestly, it's an ongoing effort to create some consistency, and that's why there are so many changes, and we apologize for that. But overall, the new changes that we're bringing, there are very few. And I would like to supplement what Adam said about the delinquency and the delinquency, raising that from $20 to $75. That's really an effort to make it a little bit more customer friendly. If you get a $25 delinquency fee at $20, it's just, we haven't been imposing delinquency fees for 2 years, but it makes it a little bit more customer friendly, I think. And I think the other thing Adam is going to mention is that we would like to get the board's direction to start to resume turnoffs for non-payment and resume the delinquency fees. We haven't been, as I said, we haven't been doing them for 2 years. And, our delinquencies at this rate are approaching $1 million. We don't want to turn off a lot of people, but there are some large balances out there that we would like to be able to have some stick. Yeah, the carrot didn't work.
Can we do that now?
Yes. Yeah, and really, I wouldn't want to really the bulk of turnoffs. I wouldn't really want to resume turnoffs for the bulk of our customers until after July 1st when we do the transfer to the property taxes, and just let that new process start running. So, but there are some accounts that owe big balances and haven't paid in years, and I think we need to
get their attention.
I agree.
Be able to, it's not fair that at the end of the day, all of our ratepayers could end up subsidizing them.
Could you go over those numbers? I looked in the general manager's report, and it was showing like it went up from 50 to 75 notices of 75,000 notices of delinquents, and I think those are like repeating notices, not 75,000 customers or whatever. And I'm surprised at that $1 million. I thought the manager's report was much less than that.
That's in this month's GM report.
Yeah.
So one thing Adam pointed out is that there's about 37 accounts that owe more than $1,000. So we're not talking about a lot of accounts, but some of them owe significantly more than $1,000. And I'm sorry, Director Nelson, what numbers did you want me to go over? Like the delinquency
the
notices?
Numbers of how many delinquencies? Because I think in the report it was showing just the notifications, but I think those are repeating notifications.
Yeah, so that would be for this year, I believe. We've continued sending out past due notices throughout the pandemic. So those are but obviously we haven't done. We've done a couple turnoffs during this period, but they were landscape accounts. They weren't covered by the governor's executive order. But really, and the board gave us direction early in the pandemic to stop turnoffs, and so we went above and beyond what we were required to do under the governor's executive order, and we didn't turn off businesses, we didn't turn off landscape accounts, but we did, and we've been pretty successful in collecting on them, but there were a couple that we couldn't, and we had to turn off to protect ourselves from loss.
Yeah, I mean, that we're not talking about that today, but I think we ought to bring that back to the board and make a decision on that.
Which one?
About the ability to do turnoffs.
Well, I think we didn't actually have a formal process before, and so I'm not sure that we need
All right then.
a formal process now. It was.
Yeah.
There's currently, there's no order in place, but I would also like to point out that this board of directors imposed your own moratorium on turnoffs. I believe it was 3 weeks before the governor, or 2 weeks
Yeah, so
before the
that's what
governor.
I'm saying. If we have to rescind that one, then let's.
But we didn't actually do an order. It was just.
Oh, we just gave you direction.
Yes.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
undo it then.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay.
In
I think it's time.
a
We don't wanna let it
fair-minded
go.
way.
Yeah, in a fair-minded way. We don't want to get too far. I mean, you allow some customers to get so far out, and the balance is so much that they can't. I mean, we need to say, hey, let's.
Here's the payment plan.
But you still
Here's the
have
payment
an
plan, that's
option
correct.
for
Here's the
hardship
payment plan.
cases, right, Scott? So if
Yes.
somebody
You still have
comes
the
to you
help
with a
to
hardship.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have the Help to Others program, and we're required to provide payment plans, so 1-year payment plans. So if a customer does have a hardship, we've always offered payment plans. So that was just part of our standard practice before, but if somebody has a hardship, we'll work with them.
And Scott, remind the board how much money we received from the state for the REACH program? That was like a little bit over 200,000.
Yeah, it was 213,000.
So we paid customers' accounts that were overdue up in the tune of over 200,000.
$200,000, yeah.
With funds from the state.
With funds from the
Yes.
state. So
Yes.
did that significantly reduce whatever's outstanding, or was
Yeah, it did
50%?
reduce it. It
Was
reduced it by about 20%, and then it started growing again.
Okay.
But yeah, so the assistance programs, that was one program that really helped. That I think it was $213,000, but customers have also been applying through the county and other programs, and some have been receiving funding, and they've been receiving rental assistance, and we were very active throughout the pandemic in promoting all the programs that were available to customers, and so that helped keep helped customers a lot, and it helped keep our delinquency down, our delinquency rate.
Yeah, good. All right, shall we move forward then? Thank you, Adam.
John wants to do his public hearing. He's antsy about.
I'm curious if anyone shows up. This is the time and place for a public hearing to receive public input concerning proposed ordinance 1399.15, regulations governing domestic water service, which will revise Part 1 definitions, Part 2 authority, Part 3 service connections, Part 4 application for service, Part 5 charges, Part 6 credit and billing, Part 8 domestic water service infrastructure, Part 9 conditions of domestic water service, Part 11 cross connection, Part 12 water management and the appendices. Ms. Bermudez, have we completed proper notification of this public hearing?
Yes, Mr. President, we have a notice of public hearing was published in the Desert Sun and the Imperial Valley Press newspapers of general circulation.
Thank you. I hereby declare the public hearing open. Does anyone attending this public hearing wish to be heard? Please give your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And we don't have anybody online either.
And yes, for the record, Mr. President, we do not have any members of the public online.
All right. I thought we had a written communication from DVBA.
We did.
It was included with your board packet, yes.
Right, so have we received any written communications?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, we have one from DVBA.
Thank you. Council Frey, will you please comment on this public hearing?
Yes, Mr. President, the board has given the public the right to be heard during this public hearing. After the public hearing, the board will be able to make its decision on the proposed ordinance 1399.15, which amends the previous ordinance, or which amends ordinance 1399.14, and will revise the definitions and the authority and service connection and the other parts mentioned previously by you, as well as all of the conditions of service as mentioned in the parts listed previously by you.
Thank you. There being no further input to the adoption of the proposed ordinance, I hereby declare the public hearing closed. The board will now take up discussion and consider the proposed ordinance. I think we've done a pretty good job of that already. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 1399.15?
I'll make the motion, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Do we need to do roll call on this? Yes. All right, so roll call vote.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that ordinance is adopted on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, gentlemen.
4.5.
We'll see.
All right. Let's see, we have, what am I looking at here?
Board member general
Board
comments.
member general comments, yes, thank you. Director Nelson.
I have no comments.
I have no comments, Mr. President.
No comments.
Okay, thanks.
No comments.
You know, the only comment I had was that drone video taking the tower down. I don't know if anyone saw it.
I saw it.
The water tower got photobombed by a beautiful carrot field right behind it. And so if you haven't seen it yet, it's worth a look.
I'm sure they were using efficient irrigation practices as well.
Yes, very. So I think we actually have a return reservoir there, so we do recycle the water. So we're on to meetings, right?
Yes, sir.
11B. The first one is March 9th CRB, Directors Nelson and Estrada.
I'll go first because my comments are shorter, and then Director Nelson probably needs to clarify a lot of my comments. It's certainly a lot of information. I'm still learning a lot of the mechanisms of the river, and it seems like it's very busy, and a lot of coordination between the upper basin, lower basin, and I was trying to keep up. I took down some notes, and it looks like it's still in pretty bad shape. I think we're hoping for good water in 2023. I made note of that.
Yeah. We better have some good
We
water.
better have some good water, or it's going to get even worse. We heard a little bit about the DROA, which I've been getting familiar with more and more. They're trying to figure out what they could do, how much volume they need to save up there, and then from what units. I think there's a number of reservoirs that they haven't really determined, but they have to pick where they're going to save the water. It sounds like they're thinking about shifting releases to later in the year. And I'm sure you'll get to that as to maybe why that's a better time to do it. And then that was kind of more on the river, and there's a number of reports, and we talked about Glen Canyon and some of the issues there with the power generation. And then we got to the state hydrology, and that's not looking good at also. 72% average on the reservoirs. Snowpack's declining. I think we're at 80% average as of March of this year. And then it sounds like March is the last wet month, so it's not going to get much better. And this is good for me because it's starting to give me a sense of
No, it's not good for you.
Well, I'm
It's,
saying, I'm saying it's good for me in the sense that, you know, I've heard you kind of speak in the sense of times of year, you know, March and I'm starting to get a sense of what that means, you know, even as just kind of saying, oh, March is the last wet year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really have a sense of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what I mean. Good.
Yeah,
That I'm
yeah.
keeping track of this. Met, same thing, 70% storage. I think the LA Department of Water and Power, I think the big thing I heard from them is they have an issue with moving water, so or getting water moved to them.
Yeah, they have a number of districts in their service area that are state water project only. And so with a low allocation on the state water project system, they can't get enough water into those service areas to meet the needs. And so they can't get Colorado River water over there.
Okay.
So there's a real tension right now between the LAWP representative and the MET representative of what MET is actually doing to solve that issue.
But who's the agency that has reserves in their reservoirs but also can't get it out? Is that, I thought I heard either Met or LADWP.
So I think that in that context, it was Met has storage, but but LADWP is arguing or making the point that they can't get that storage supply over to their state water project only agencies that are in their service area, and what disservice that is to those agencies,
Okay.
and how
Yeah,
there has to be a solution to that.
That-
So there's a real tension going on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard. But anyways, that's kind of what I got out of it. You know, there's a lot more to it, but you know, I know you're juggling all that, and it's
Well,
super
now
complicated.
you're gonna make me give a longer report.
Okay.
So well, that's all good. So under the drought contingency plan that was signed in 2019, the Upper Basin is required to do DROA releases from the Upper Basin to help support the water supply situation at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So really the best opportunity for those DROA releases are to come from the Flaming Gorge Reservoir, which is up on the Green River up in Montana. And so that storage area is about a little over 3 million acre feet of storage. It's probably about 80% full or so. So it's contemplated that the Bureau would make a release from the Flaming Gorge down to Lake Powell to support the lake level 3490. Because at 3490, that's the water gets to the top of the tube that is generating the electricity. So just this last week, we went below the milestone at Lake Powell of 3525. So we're actually 3524 and change. And so that was the benchmark. Like that's the trigger that all the sirens go off, and you know we better do something, because there's only between, I think there's, I can't remember exactly. For some reason, I'm thinking there's 4 million acre feet of water between those two levels. Maybe it's less than that. So the real critical issue that the Bureau is looking at is the power generation at Lake Powell. So there is a real desire to do something in addition to the drawer releases from a lower basin perspective. And that's what a lot of these meetings that we're attending, there was a caucus meeting yesterday that I couldn't attend, but Jim and Robert were there. And so there's a lot of internal discussion about how best to how are we going to manage that. So this Friday, the Bureau is going to issue a letter out to the contractors and say, hey, this is our plan. And so it's we'll hear more next week about that. And you know, so you states you can respond to that. So so a lot of the discussion is about, you know, what can the lower basin do to help support Lake Powell? And, you know, we have particular, you know, 4.4 million acre feet right, and with the last couple of years, we've been only using 4.2 and developing ICS, and so we have been very proactive from a California lower basin perspective, but it's just this hydrology is nuts. I think we're in the 90% of average on the snowpack, but that doesn't relate to a decent runoff. When you look in the 80s, back in the 80s, we had 3 years within a 4-year period where we had 17 million acre feet of runoff, of unregulated runoff to Lake Powell. I mean, to the system, 17 million. And in the last 4 years, we've had 3 years under 6 million acre feet of unregulated flow.
Is that because people are taking it out?
It's because it's dry. It's dry. However, there is an issue that the lower basin has about what actually the upper basin is doing in terms of their demand management side of their upper basin release or usage. For example, someone might say, "Oh, we've been taking shortages for years in the upper basin." Well, you take a shortage when there's no water in the river, right? But a real shortage, like what we're experiencing in California, is you don't take the water when the water's there, right? It's a whole different mindset, right? So you bring up a good point, Anthony, about the upper basin and what the lower basin's perspective on that, and that's going to be more of a theme, I think, moving forward as you know we're looking at just how much do we do in the lower basin and how much of savings there actually is in the upper basin. Because we're getting down to as Costello's finding out, we're getting down to really low levels here, and we do need to protect levels at Lake Mead too for our future supplies, as we may have to conserve to get those, and to be able to continue to generate power, which is an issue as well.
Good.
Yep.
What a nice report.
Great.
Nice report. It's bad. I mean, that's right. Hydrology is.
Right, so I can go through some of the next meetings, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
And a lot of these are revolving around these same issues. And so there was a California agencies meeting that was prior to the federal meeting on the 11th. So on the 10th, we met as the working group for the lower basin. Let's see, this was the lower basin before we met with the federals, the feds, and there've also been now a couple, and I missed one, but the California agencies have been meeting as well, and so that's not on here, but I missed it. Jim was at that one, but we're going over these issues, hearing from the feds of what their priorities are as far as the power goes and water management. So on the 11th, then we met with the federal representatives, and that was I attended by Zoom. Chris attended in person, so I had those two meetings.
Thank you.
On the 10th, attended the Coachella Valley Irrigated Lands Coalition. I think you were at that meeting as well, John. And we talked about our budget. We talked about trying to get additional people who are not in the coalition and what strategies might be for that to help moderate our fees. We're some of the highest fees in the state actually in our at I think we're at $5.55, and many irrigated lands because they have a broader membership are down at the $3 levels per acre. So
yeah, there's probably 15,000 acres of irrigated lands that could be in the program. I mean, something like that are not, because they're not feeling the heat from the regulatory agency, the regional boards.
Right.
That's a problem. We also, at that meeting, seated, I think we did at that meeting, Alex
yeah.
Sanchez as our new
President.
president of that group. So that was good for him to step up to that position. Happy that he did that.
Yeah.
Let's see, so March 11th, interview with Water Alliance, Director Strzok.
Yeah, I had to do an interview for Water Alliance, and so I took care of it that day. I had a lot of help from Jesse and Victoria, so thank you for helping me set that up. And just talked about general stuff, things we do at the district, and our work related around consolidating systems, small water systems throughout the region. So that was what the interview was about.
Right, good. Disadvantaged communities on the 16th, and I did not make that for a variety of reasons.
So we missed Carrie. She wasn't there, but we missed her. And Dan did a good job. He's firm at keeping everybody on task to finish by 5. I think we went over a little bit, but it was a good conversation. We went over general projects, a lot of good momentum, a lot of different funding opportunities. I think a lot of the funding's starting to come together. So it's a good meeting. I think one of the big takeaways here is that we are getting ready to travel to Sacramento to make a $20 million request to the state board. It sounds like internal staff at the water board is very supportive of the ask, but they do want us to make a presentation to the board at their April meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we are getting ready to do that. I think that's huge for us, for them to want to give us a $23 million check to complete a lot of the projects that we've identified as priority. And so we are getting ready to do that. So thank you for getting us to this point, everyone at engineering and everybody else involved. So that's kind of what we talked about that day.
Good. And then we had Water Education Foundation Colorado River Tour.
So the Water Education Foundation does a annual, it was their first in-person tour in a couple years, and so they have a Lower Colorado River tour, and we're towards the end of the tour, and so they came out to look at, meet with district staff at the canal, and they came out to the farm that I'm associated with, and I talked about ag water use in the valley and what the district does as well too. So it was a good tour. They had about 40 people on the tour, 12 of which were enrolled in their Colorado River Leaders program. So that was good for them to be on that tour.
Great, thank you. Any other meetings that we need to report on?
I had one on Friday, March 11th. I toured Desert Shores community, and which I'd been to many times, but hadn't actually gone to where the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project was, and took a look at that with the supervisor, and then we had a town hall meeting, which was interesting, at the VA Center, and kind of got an overview of what that looks like and what the residents are trying to do down there.
Good. Others?
Yes, I have several meetings. On the 12th, I participated in call it an Arbor Day event. I think it was an event that was held across the state of California, different cities planting trees. The city of Coachella had its own event. They planted about 66 trees, about 100 plants, and there was some coordination that needed to happen with CVWD. That was worked through, so thank you for that. And I was there to make some comments on behalf of CVWD that day and got to plant some trees. So I sent a picture to Jim.
I'm going to ask him to autograph it.
Yeah.
What kind of trees did you plant?
Small trees, Small,
Drought tolerant?
Yeah, it's all desert. It's all desert friendly landscape.
Ficus?
Yeah, ficus.
Yeah. So that was good. On the 18th, we had a meeting. Staff, Jim and Carrie were there with Marta Guzman. She's the new regional administrator for EPA Region 9. And we met with her, her team, and the county to just talk about, what's going on with some of these systems in the east side. Talk about what we're doing from different agency perspectives, and I think it was more of an introduction, and there were some suggestions that maybe we should coordinate moving forward a bit more, because EPA is also having some conversations with the state, I think specifically with the SAFER group, and there seems to be, at that level of meetings, some of our systems that we've been working also with SAFER staff maybe not identified. So they want to make sure that all our work is kind of in one place. So I was happy with the meeting. It sounds like Ms. Guzman is familiar with this area. She has a lot of knowledge of this area, might actually have some roots here as well. And so she's certainly very open to figuring out how to bring some more attention from EPA's perspective into some of these issues. So I think it was a good meeting. So that was that. On yesterday, I had several calls and meetings with Victoria, some of our folks in DC, Lowry and Anna, some talks with Scott, just for some various opportunities. And then the Congressman's office has reached out. They're interested in doing a joint press conference for the $2.7 million that they were also able to help secure for one of our projects. And so I think that's still up in the air, but we'll hear more in either today or tomorrow. And as that gets confirmed, we'll make sure that it's sent out to the entire board, and hopefully if it's a go on Friday. It's scheduled. If it happens, I think it'll happen Friday in the morning, hopefully. And then, but it hasn't been confirmed, but we'll make sure that we invite the board and everybody else. And then, I forget the date, Jim, but we had a meeting last week, I think, with State Secretary Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of Natural Resources.
It was Tuesday, so it would have been a week ago today.
So last Tuesday we had a meeting with Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of Natural Resources. We were there with folks from the Salton Sea Authority, folks from his staff, and the county supervisor's office, and some members of the public. I think also some of the NGOs that are active in North Shore, specifically Alianza. And we talked about the West Shores project that they're working on. I think Imperial County's taking the lead on that. And then we talked about the North Lake pilot project. We talked about design. We talked about water supply. We did propose that a viable option would be water from the Rosedale Rio Bravo. It seems like it was well taken. So the ask was that we need to secure additional funding, at least for however many years of supply we need for that water, until the project can develop its own well and maybe find a different source of water. It sounds like the project in general needs additional funding. The original calculations were from maybe 3-4 years ago, so he was made aware of that. He said he was supportive of finding additional monies to keep the project that is the scale that it is right now, 156 acres. So hopefully, if there's additional monies that need to be secured, I imagine it'd be in the tune of maybe $25 million. So sounds like he was open to that. So that was a good meeting. So those are the meetings for me.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I need to add one. I had the Lower Basin meeting on the 10th. On the 11th was the federal meeting, and then on 3/14 we had a California caucus debrief on that. That was the first of the 2 debriefs. That's the one I attended on the 14th.
Okay, thanks.
That's it.
All right. Yeah, also I had the 17th, we had the Agua Caliente Principals meeting in Rancho Mirage. Okay, is there a motion to approve per diem for the meetings reported on?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, pass 5-0. Good, General Manager. Jeff?
Yes, sir. Director Estrada already spoke about the meeting we had with Secretary Crowfoot. We have started coordination, or we will be starting coordination with Reclamation later today. I reached out to a couple of folks in advance of that, but recognizing it's always best to work through the chain of command. We'll see where that gets us. I did pass to the board the draft notice from the State Division of Drinking Water on the proposed Chrome 6 standard MCL, which is 10 parts per billion, which is basically where we were the last time they ran through this. So staff is looking through that to see, it's not much of a change. It's going to be how we react to that change. LAFCO has asked for a vote for a new member. I've provided recommendations to President Powell as he is the voting member. It's really not, it's the rep for the western side of the county, not necessarily one that we would be directly involved with. And then on the COVID front, we've had 247 recovered qualifying cases, 2 mortalities, 2 direct contacts right now, so 2 folks off work. We've had 1 qualifying case to date for the month of March. For vaccinations, again, the whole federal contractor thing is held in abeyance because of a court order to stay that. We have 455 out of approximately 530 employees vaccinated, so that's about 85%, which is pretty good. Much better than the national average. And we do still have the same number of exemptions, which we are not taking any action on at this point. 23 religious and 2 for medical purposes. That's all I have, sir.
Good, thank you. Council report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As we know, 2 years ago, the governor established a statewide emergency for COVID-19. After that, there were numerous executive orders. One had to do with waiving the Brown Act requirements that allow for virtual meetings. Then, once that was lifted, it was lifted at the time that AB 361 went into effect, which said that you can engage in virtual meetings as long as there's a statewide declaration of emergency, which is still in place today. But looking at what will happen when we reach the point where there is not a state of emergency declaration, there are 2 new bills that are being proposed, very early stages, but both of which would allow for virtual meetings to continue without a state of emergency. And which would not require that the location of a director be noticed and put on the agenda for the various privacy and health concerns that came up during the pandemic. So these bills are AB 1944 and AB 2449. As I said, they would not require a declaration of an emergency. The remote location of a director would not have to be identified on the agenda. But the board and the agency would have to provide a video streaming and public be allowed to address the board virtually. AB 2449 would also require that a quorum of the board must participate in person from one location within the district and be open to the public. And in 2449, the directors who are participating virtually must have their audio and video on the entire time. So these bills are in their early stages, but it's certainly different and less restrictive than what the Brown Act was prior to 2020, or is currently as a result of the pandemic.
Do you have to be in the country? mean, what if you're out of the country?
You can be out of the country.
Still
but,
participate?
Under 2449, you would have to be on virtually, and you'd have to have your audio and your video on.
Right.
So block out the past and back if you have palm trees or something going on.
And they don't count as a quorum.
Right. So you'd have to have a quorum participating in person in the district. So.
Right.
So we'll let you know if those proceed any further.
Interesting. Okay, good, thank you. Do we have any departmental reports today?
Taking a quick poll. No, sir. Nobody's jumping to their feet.
All right. Well, appreciate that. At this time, the board will recess into closed session to consider the items listed on the agenda. There's 3 of them, and we will reconvene here to open session for a report out on what we did. I can't see them.
Someone to turn something on?
I don't know. Oh, see, look at the beautiful.
Fun closed session. Eh?
We have these imaginary things that may come.
See that? Isn't that nice?
Okay. So this is a video now that streams before the board meeting starts and during closed session, so any message.
I forgot that you took that down, and then I saw it, and I got
No,
mad.
really.
No.
Not that
We do some of that. I mean, the guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, of course they do.
We don't
I'm
use
curious.
that much.
Lone holdouts.
So, yeah, regular meeting is reconvened. We have no reportable action from closed session, and with no further business, we are adjourned. Yeah, I mean, some of the other crops we